Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Sorry about a slight delay. We were having some technical difficulties, but hopefully for next time we'll be a little more versed on how to get things started. Thanks for joining us today for Instituto for message crafting digital strategies for a broader reach. My name is Monica Nowakowski. I'm a digital communications consultant and campaigns associate for Iconico campaigns. I'll be facilitating the conversation today. If you have anything that you'd like to comment or question, please feel free to use the chat function, and we'll try to get to those questions or comments as quickly and appropriately as possible. Iconico itself is a consulting firm that works with nonprofit and advocacy organizations across the United States, but even globally. And what we try to do is help build internal capacity within those organizations so that they can then go out and do their campaigns and working with the communities a little more effectively. Always trying to promote bolder, innovative ideas. From Iconico, the idea of Instituto was born. Instituto itself is a nonprofit organization that is focused on building political power for voters of color and low-income communities. The way that we do that is actually through three different methods. We incubate new organizations, ideas, technologies that will help organize communities, help get them to take action and get them participating civically. We accelerate organizations or ideas or technologies, helping bridge gap with skill sets or just building internal capacity so that individuals within organizations that already exist or new organizations can get to the work more quickly or scale the programs that they're currently running. And then we also do capacity building for individuals and organizations, which is part of what we're doing today. Please feel free to type your name on the chat and where you live so that we can get to know who's actually watching and know where you're watching from. For today, some of the things that we want to make sure that everybody walks away with is knowing how to identify target audiences, identifying that target audience's needs, their wants, and keywords that connect with them, and then ultimately how to craft messages that connect and move people to action. Some of the concepts that you may be familiar with or not familiar with, but we'll be discussing in today's webinar is basically targeting, social listening, fast message crafting, and ACT testing. And like I said, we'll get into a little more detail on all of those things as we move forward. First, I want to talk about basically all the noise that we face. All of us spend, like a significant amount of time communicating on our computers and online, approximately 4.5 hours of each and every day, according to national statistics, between email and social media. So we spend about 2 hours checking our email and 2 hours checking social media on average every day. We communicate a lot online. In 2019, Group M, which is the world's largest media investment group that is responsible for every 1 in 3 ads globally, produces an annual report that predicts how people will choose to spend their time with media. And they say that this year will be the first ever where online is actually going to surpass every other vertical. So that includes all other traditional media outlets, TV, print, and radio. So we're going to be spending about almost 10 hours per day consuming online media. So we already know the power of online. That's probably why a lot of us are actually here today. We just need to make sure that when we are putting all of this effort into trying to communicate with people online, that we're actually connecting with messages that are going to connect with them on a personal level, and again, that are going to move them to action. When we're talking about all the noise, lots of times it's difficult to understand how many messages people actually get and are bombarded with on a daily basis. So I just wanted to run through some numbers so you can understand exactly what they look like. Of course, everyone has different routines, and so the numbers aren't like an exact science, but by the time you left your house this morning, between packaging labels, radio, TV, any news or websites that you visit, you had already been exposed to about 480 brand messages before you even walked out the door. By the time you made it to work, when you're talking about passing billboards, buses, cabs, and all the other ways, the radio that you listen to, that number jumped to about 1,200 brand messages. Right now, when your day is about wrapping up and you're going to be headed home again, that number is going to double again to about 3,700 brand messages. So when it comes to the number of messages that we get every day, the number is incredible. And we're all competing for the same space. That's the worst part. When you're talking about an organization or a campaign, we're competing with the same space and the same attention from the same people, with companies and brand names that spend like anywhere from several thousand to millions of dollars to get that person's attention. And they're a lot more successful at it usually. And the reason being because a good percentage of those thousands and thousands of dollars go to developing messages that connect with people, not just getting the message in front of them. So they're not just about placing the message in certain places, but they think a lot about what am I saying, who am I saying it to, when am I saying it to them. The other thing so first of all, I want to ask, out of all of the messages that you probably saw today, which ones are the ones that you actually remember? And why do you remember them? Go ahead and type in the chat section if you remember any particular brand message from today. If there was a message that you saw today that connected somehow personally with what's going on with your life in this moment, that's probably the message that's going to float to the top of your head when we're thinking about all the different messages that we've learned to kind of push into the background because we get so many of them every day. The bottom line is we're all drowning in messages every day, so much so that we're programmed to tune out the majority of them. We don't even notice them. I know I don't notice billboards I pass on the street. I don't read what's stickers that are stuck on cabs and buses because we're just used to seeing them constantly. Okay, so somebody was saying they remember a message from a commercial during a podcast. And so it was most likely either because, it was between some songs you enjoy, or I bet you that it might have been, something that you were thinking about recently. So again, it's all about like the personal connection in that moment. Seeing a Game of Thrones post. I think all of us have Game of Thrones on the mind right now. And again, that's because it's happening right now. It's something that we're interested in. It's something that people are talking about. It's something that, people are gathering around the water cooler and coming up with fan theories. So again, it's all about what's happening in your life at that moment. If that weren't happening right now, if somebody had talked about Game of Thrones, or you had seen a message for Game of Thrones sometime between the last season and the current season, it may not have connected on the same level. Edward Jones? Oh, okay, Edward Jones came by somebody's house and the person is interested in paying off their debt, so that's why they remember it. So good. We're understanding that basically if you've seen thousands of messages today. Up until right now, you've seen thousands of messages today, but the ones that you remember are the ones that connect with you on a personal level. So that's the way that we need to think about the messages that we're putting out. The issue with organizations and campaigns, again, it's all about the connection. We already mentioned that, right? Is that lots of times we lead with facts and altruism. So the problem with those two things is that the validity of a fact, we used to think that a fact is a fact. There's no contending a fact. It is. It's true in all its form because that's what a fact is. But nowadays, the validity of a fact is weighed heavily by personal beliefs and values. The problem with altruism is that it doesn't place personal responsibility on me as an individual to take action. And so we're going to talk a little more in depth about those things. When we're talking about, lots of us, of course, want to believe that altruism, we want to be the good guys, right? But even if I'm not altruistic, I'm sorry, going back to the previous slide. Even if I'm not altruistic, at the end of the day, like it's not going to really affect whether or not I ate, whether my children ate, whether I can make my house payment or anything like that. It's not something that, unless I feel like a genuinely altruistic person, I feel a personal responsibility to my community at large, it's not going to affect my day-to-day life. So that's why altruism works at times and other times it doesn't. The problem with facts is that they're important and they're interesting, but they're just data. People just see them as data. They don't connect with me on a personal level, which is especially important when the majority of people are not interested in politics. And my belief in the validity of a fact can be swayed very easily by whether or not I lean one way or another. According to research done by the National Democratic Institute, it's only about 1% of any given population that is eagerly interested in politics. So people who know who's in office, people who know who's up for election, people who know what bills are on the ballot, they read all of the ballot summaries, they read up the platforms for the different candidates. That's only about 1% of the entire population. On top of that, you have about 9% of the population that is interested, and they might take action, but they might not. So they're people who are interested in politics. They might participate in different groups, often because they feel like the outcome is actually going to have an effect on their personal life or the family or people that they care about around them. But even then, they rarely feel it will have like a major impact on their personal life. Then you have about 15% who are well-informed citizens. People who like knowing what's going on, they like to know who's saying what, they'll read catchy headlines, that are in their newspapers or in their social feed, but aren't necessarily so in-depth in it that they feel like a personal responsibility. They just like knowing what's going on because they understand, generally speaking, how decisions made in government, policies that are passed, bills that are presented might have an impact on their lives. But that only makes up 25% of the population. And when we're putting out our messages, via social media, via email, whatever other platforms we're using as our communications tools, these are usually the people that we're talking to, one way or the other, whether they're with us or whether they're against us. These are the people that we're usually talking to. And the problem is that these people are already decided. You're not going to necessarily sway them. If they're with you, they're convinced. If they're against you, you're not going to convince them. They just want to see what you're talking about. So that then they can come up with an argument against it or reasons why your facts and numbers are not valid. 75% of the population is either undecided or non-committed. And this is where we need to spend the majority of our efforts. But because we know the people who are interested, who participate, who interact, it feels easier to talk to them. And it's a little more difficult to really understand, how do I reach out to those people who are undecided and non-committed, because I don't interact with them, or they're not coming to me, they're not coming to my events, they're not subscribing to my newsletter, I don't know what their challenges and their motivations are, or I have a general idea, but I haven't really spoken to them because they're not interested in participating. Oh, I just want to say welcome. It looks like we have some additional people joining. Please feel free to type your name and location for everybody who's joined since the beginning of the webinar, so we can introduce ourselves to each other and see where everybody's watching from on the chat window. Okay. So we need to be connecting with the other 75%. The issue becomes then, whose facts do they believe? Because the opposition is also putting out their own facts, in the day and age of alternative facts. Recently, some of you may have seen that there was a video shown from the White House of an aide trying to remove a microphone from a reporter that was trying to ask some questions in a media briefing. And they actually accelerated the video, so it looked like it was more of a tussle than it actually was. So that's a fact. It happened. The video's there. You would think that there's no way to sway opinion one way or another, but even something as simple as accelerating the video and putting it out that way makes the situation look like something it's not. And when it comes from an organization that is considered to be trustworthy, such as the White House, then it becomes an even more serious fact. If people put more weight on it, depending on their view of the situation. So what we call that is called confirmation bias. We like to think that people make really cold, rational decisions when they're presented with facts. But the bottom line is that we actually make a lot of our decisions based on emotions. And that's why we actually need to be appealing to emotions. We need to be connecting with people on a personal level and appealing to their emotions, because emotions are the center of decision making. It's been shown in research previously, people who have damaged or missing amygdalas, which is the emotion center in the brain, have a very difficult time actually making decisions, very simple decisions, from very simple to very complex. And so that is some of the research that goes to support that a lot of our decisions aren't actually based on numbers, percentages, hard facts that we believe to be completely true. and no way to disprove. Bottom line is, like, depending on your beliefs, what you think, and what they make you feel, that fact could sway you one way or another. When we're talking about altruism, it's only based on national research that's been done, and there's been a very limited amount of research that's been done on this, but when they've gauged certain segments of the population in different areas of the country, it's only about 20% of the general population that it comes off or answers questions that would identify them as being genuinely altruistic. And what I mean by genuinely altruistic is them feeling a personal responsibility for actually doing something for, the people in their community, other people, somebody who is outside themselves. Altruism, it's defined as like a selfless concern for others. We're often asking supporters to sacrifice either time or effort or money, for the greater good, using messages like support your community, children deserve better, or build a better future. But nowadays, in the days of, Cokes and Pepsis and, beer commercials that all have these altruistic messages, how is a person somebody who's not really ingrained in what's happening in the community, or how government, politics, elected officials affect their daily lives, how are they supposed to decide what things they're actually supposed to care about when they're being asked to care about everything? So that's one of the reasons that we need to kind of shape our messages, because we need to understand that it's basic human nature to worry and care about ourselves first. Those in our close family circle second, and then we have like decreased levels of concern as we're distanced from who's being affected. Okay, it's one of the reasons that as organizations, we all often want to collect personal stories with people who look like them, people that they can relate to, because then again, it creates the personal connection. We have to know and have to maintain in our mind that the individual is always going to outweigh the community. My child is always going to outweigh children in general, and my future is always going to outweigh everyone else's. And so when we're crafting our messages, we need to bring the message to a more singular individual level. So as an example, based on a campaign that we actually supported at Iconico, some of the data that we gathered, which was about student pushout, is that students of color are anywhere from 6 to 10 times more likely to be suspended, which leads to student pushout, which student pushout is basically getting them to ultimately leave a school, either moving to a school that is less affluent, or in a different area, trying to create, like an elite student body. And so we'll use messages like students of color anywhere from 6 to 10 times more likely to just be suspended, leading to student pushout. Learn more and make a difference now. Learn more, make a difference, which is very general. And we know that the message is obviously geared to people who care about students in general, but especially students of color. But if we're going to take that message and make it more about an individual, make it more at a singular level, a better message would be your child could be pushed out of school by unfair and biased discipline policies at their school. So it's individualizing the message. Sign up now for updates on what to look for and how to take action. So that's a message that's going to drive me as a parent a little more than the previous message where I'm trying to be altruistic and look out for everybody's children, because there's a difference between looking out for everybody's children and looking out for my child. If it's my child, I'm definitely going to take action. The next thing I want to make sure that we talk about is because lots of times we have general ideas and we really believe that we know the communities that we're speaking to, which I don't doubt that we do. We work with them, we talk to them, we interact with them, we do information sessions and know your right sessions and all these different things. But sometimes it's important to take a step back and really think at a granular level about who the person that we're actually trying to connect with is. And again, taking into account that we should actually be trying to connect with that 75% of people who aren't being reached by our messages right now. The way that we do that is by something that we call in the marketing industry persona outlining. What that is basically defining the different archetypes of people that we're going to be talking to, and then identifying very individual, important information that helps me connect with them on a personal level. Okay, so the first step you're going to want to do is actually list out your archetypes, and they could be different things. You could have one, you could have multiple. It just kind of depends on your organization, who you're working with, the campaign, or the candidate that you're working for. But once you list out your archetypes, and here I just put some examples up there, working class father, a single mother, recent college graduates. For each of those archetypes, then you actually want to list out their lifestyle and personality, what their motivations are, what their challenges are, and most importantly, what you can do as an organization or as an individual or your candidate can do to help support them. There's one tool that you're going to be receiving after we wrap up the webinar. But I'm actually going to show it to you right now, which is a template for persona outlining. So this should help you actually design and outline these different personas. So the template, you'll just replace the information or input the information. It's to help you think about the different areas that you should be thinking about when you're trying to really define who it is that you're speaking to. First of all, if you can actually put a picture of somebody who represents that archetype, it helps you visualize when you're thinking about how am I speaking to this person, but it isn't necessary. You'll define the archetype up at the top, put the title, and it's up to you what those things are. But these different questions just help you think about the different areas you should be looking at and defining. So there's demographic information. Then there's some questions about the personality and lifestyle, political leading, relationship status. Then it goes into interest. The interest section is really important when we talk about targeting. The interest section is going to help you when you're actually placing some money on targeting, either with online ads or boosting posts on Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media platforms. It'll help you identify what interest you can actually tag your messages with, so that they get in front of the right people. Lots of times you as an organizer or as a campaigner may not think that hobbies is important, but when you're talking about a particular archetype, like when you're talking about Latinos, and you write down on the personal outline that, obviously Latinos are big in soccer, there might be some kind of or connection or coordination you can make with a local soccer organization or with a special event that's happening that will help you reach the people that you're not currently reaching. So that's why interests are really important when we're thinking about ways to reach out to the people that we're not currently reaching out to. And then the last three sections are really important. These other sections, you may have answers to all of these things. You may not. It doesn't matter. It's just about getting as close to the persona to understand these last three questions, which are basically their challenges, their motivations, and the support you can provide. When we're talking about challenges, it's basically just thinking about what inhibits them from actually taking action with my campaign, with my candidate, with my organization. And so you want to think about what inhibits them financially. Is there, for this particular archetype, you may have outlined that they don't have a vehicle, that they mostly use public transportation. And so there may be financial burdens to getting to different events or actions. Mentally, is there a particular education level that doesn't allow them to fully understand the way that you're putting a message across? Sometimes we send out wonky messages that we understand, but we're not connecting with the person that we're actually trying to serve because we need to speak on a different level to them. When it's talking about emotionally, is there a particular set of emotions? If we're talking about a parent, like I said, we want to really focus on how things affect their family, how they provide for their family. Culturally, is there something within their cultural group that makes them believe differently to what we need them to believe in order to understand how much a certain issue is actually affecting their community, geographically and socially. And then the same for motivations. It's basically the same areas, but what motivates them? What would motivate them financially, mentally, emotionally? Think of what your persona would look like. Yeah, so just think about what they look like in general, and then think about the challenges and the motivations that they face or will help push them to take action. And then ultimately the support. So what can you do to either help eliminate challenges or mitigate them? And what can you do to enhance their motivations? Because the motivations are going to get them to take action. The challenges are the things that are stopping them from taking action. And ultimately, what we want them to do is to take action. So you as an organization, what is it that you have that you can provide? And that's the stuff that you should be putting in messages in front of this particular persona. If you have any questions when we send out the template, you'll also get my email at the end of the training. So if you have any additional questions that we're not able to cover right now, please feel free to email me with any additional questions or any ideas if you think that you could actually help refine this tool. We're all a community and we're all here to help each other. So feel free to come reach out with questions or suggestions even after the webinar is over. After we've talked about basically who it is that you're speaking to, the next thing we want to know is what is it that they're saying. And this is one of the areas that takes time, but we often ignore because we know what they're saying, but the problem is we forget that the people we're hearing from are that 25% of people who are anywhere from eagerly interested in politics to well-informed citizens. But we're not really hearing from the 75% of people who are undecided or non-committed that we actually are trying to reach out to. So that's why social listening is so important, because these are the people that you haven't spoken to yet. These are the people who haven't come to your events, who haven't signed commitment cards, who haven't interacted with you previously, but you still need to know what it is that they're saying. And not just about your organization, but about the issue in general, about the issue, about the candidate, about the platform. Whatever it is, you have to have an understanding of what their sentiment in general is. Lots of times we pay thousands of dollars to do really extensive research, which is great. We get a lot of important information in there, but sometimes we don't have the resources to be able to do that. So some general social listening, at least when it comes to communications, will give you an understanding of what's being said. So social listening is going to help you get the general public sentiment for or against you, your issue, your campaign, your candidate. It's going to let you know where there are information gaps. So, for example, there was a campaign that we were helping support, talking about the fact that there is a lack of Latino leadership in decision-making positions, Latino leadership. And even though here in Arizona, a great number of the student population, I think almost 50% currently of K through 12 students are actually Latino. So the boards and decision-making bodies do not look like the student body that they're trying to serve. But when we did some social listening, a lot of the questions that people were asking as the information was being put out there, that the representation wasn't there from both sides, both people with us and against us, was, but why does that matter? Ultimately, everybody should be looking for ways to support all students regardless of their race, which is true. But there is an information gap there about how representation actually can affect outcomes for particular segments of the student population, and especially when such a large number of the student population is from a particular section of our community, we need to make sure that we're attending to their particular needs. Social listening is also going to let you know kind of what misinformation is being spread and believed. And so that happens not necessarily just on an article or a blog post, but the comment section of those articles and blog posts. It's going to let you know what arguments are being made so that then you can go and find information or messages that can counteract those arguments. It's also going to let you identify what outlets, either personally or purposely or not, are either creating supporters for you or creating antis, just based on the way that they put out information, the way that they're talking about it, and then the people who are consuming that information is reacting to it. The first thing you want to do is actually create a list of keywords. The reason you need keywords is because keywords is what you're going to do to help search, to see what the conversation is around those things. So to create your list, number one, you're just going to want to write down words associated with your organization, your campaign, or your candidate. Anything you can think of that has already been said to you repeatedly or is used consistently whenever they're spoken about, either in person, online, in TV, in media, whatever that is. So a general list of keywords that are associated. Then you want to make sure to include variations of spellings. Sometimes, online things are shortened, they're abbreviated, they're, those different things. You want to make sure to include those variations in your list. Pick out the buzzwords, the ones that aren't necessarily just tied to your organization or campaign or candidate, but the ones that are used at large in public, which highlight them. Which ones are the ones that somebody who may not be even aware of your issue is using in a different context. Those are big buzzwords. Make sure you include slogans, both yours and for the opposition. And of course, branded hashtags. So any hashtags that you're using, or even, the opposition is using, write down all of those things and create your big list of keywords. If you're having a little difficulty coming up with keywords, there's a website which is called wordstream.com/keywords that helps you actually find related keywords to whatever your search is. So you can put in a search term, you can put in the name of somebody, you can put the name of an organization, or just a general issue, and it'll help you identify keywords that are associated with those particular searches online. Then, once you have your keywords, you're going to actually search. You're going to do some online searching to hear, to see, to read, to hear all of the different things that are being said about and around the issue, campaign, or candidate. So you're going to search social media, your Facebooks, your Twitter, your Instagram. You're going to take those list of words and search for them on those different platforms and see what the conversation is. And some might be directly related to your campaign and some may not. But again, you're trying to gauge what the general sentiment is around certain keywords and identify buzzwords. Okay, you're going to want to search blogs or websites that are either covering your campaign or your issues, or that they're just covering politics or legislation in general. Online forums. So there are a bunch of online forums that aren't connected to a particular social media platform, but are just online forums where different communities exist. But it can get kind of hectic to read those things. So there actually is a website, which is called boardreader.com. That you can go to that actually crawls all different online forums, so then it can gather information and comments that are made with the keywords that you're searching in one spot. So that will make it a little easier for you. Go to Google Trends. Google Trends, and not only search for your keywords, but even just look, generally speaking, what kind of trends are happening in your local area. That's going to help with creating messages that are current and in the moment based on conversations that are just happening in general in your local area. And it's also going to help you possibly identify other keywords. There might be other keywords that come up that you'll want to add to your list based on conversations that are happening in the local area. There's also another website called buzzsumo.com that also does helps you with keyword searching, seeing different posts online that are being made with those keywords, so you can then read them. Even if you don't do all of these things and just do one or two things, the number one thing I'm going to recommend that you do that doesn't require any extra work once you've done it is setting up Google Alerts. You should set up Google Alerts, and you can search online and just say Google Alerts, and it'll take you to the site. As long as you have an account with Google, you can have it send you either daily or monthly or even weekly emails, and it will email anything that Google has crawled that week that contains the keywords. So you can use it for a particular candidate or an organization, or if there's a really big buzzword, so you can see what kind of articles and blog posts and things are coming up. Right now, we did a search on Google Trends, and so we see that some of the top things that people are searching for today is William Barr. There's Live Nation tickets, Jonas Brothers tours, Billboard. Not everything is going to connect, but if there is some kind of connection that you can make to people, and you know that people are talking about it on that day, you've made that personal connection. You've spoken to them in a way that connects with the way that people are thinking in that moment. Finally, and what we're mostly probably anxious to get to is, okay, so now we know who we're talking to. We know what people are saying about us, about the opposition, about a particular issue. But now I have my message. How do I say it? There's two the first thing you want to do is what I called fast message crafting. So oftentimes, like I said in the example previously when we were talking about altruism, is that we have a message that we want to get across, and we know we have facts and we have things that we know people will care about or we feel is important for people, but there is a particular way to actually say the same message that places important points that will get people to take action in a particular order. So the way that we do that is one, and I know we already said that, we can't just base the message on facts, but bottom line is like when we provide data, it is important. It's just about how we present the data that can make the difference about whether people put weight on the fact or not. So the way, and so I'm hoping that this acronym this abbreviation will help you remember it. But what we're going to be talking about is taking your message and then restructuring it by looking at these 4 different areas. We're going to look at the facts, what they attain, making it singular, and then placing top priority. So step 1, when we're talking about facts, is using the information that we've already outlined with the persona and what messages are already being put out there, and write down the facts. So, and when we're talking about the messages that are being put out there, we're talking both the facts that you have to, the data that you have to present to people, but also the information and data that people who are against you are putting out there. Then think about what's happening and why. Who's being affected? How are they affected? What are you as an organization or a campaign or the candidate that you're supporting, what are you doing about it? Each, and you're going to list them. It could be one, it could be multiple, it could be different facts depending on the persona that you're actually trying to talk to. But you're going to list those out for one particular persona, the persona that you're trying to reach out to. Okay, each fact can then be turned into an individual message for the different archetypes that we said. So even if it's one fact that is overarching to the entire community, think about how to shape that fact or how it affects a particular archetype in the individual way that it might affect a different persona in a completely different way. Okay, don't forget, again, because this is like the final part. If you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the chat so that we can cover them before the webinar wraps up. And please remember that we're gonna share, tools and this presentation after the fact so that you can review this information. And I'll always be available by email if you have any follow-up questions after the fact as well. Okay, but make sure to use the chat if you have any questions. Okay, so we've listed the facts and we've kind of written them down based on how they affect the different personas that we're talking to. Okay, now we have to think about what's the attainment? What do these different personas get for acting on those facts? So for each fact or grouping of facts, outline what is gained by the person actually taking action. So again, we're thinking about what would motivate them. Look at the motivations in the persona outline. How is it benefiting them, either emotionally, culturally, financially? What do they get out of it? Okay, what are the benefits, especially compared to not doing anything? If nothing is done, how are they going to be challenged? How are they going to be how is it going to affect them negatively, either themselves, their family, their friends, people that they care about? Okay, and what will the positive outcome be? So under attained, you're going to write down both. How are they, just generally speaking, what's gained? What's gained either by taking action or not taking action, positively or negatively? Write down what's going to happen based on whether this person chooses to take action or not. Okay. Now that we know the facts and we know what they're going to get or what's going to happen, whether they take action or not, then you want to actually make the message singular. We've been talking about connecting on a personal level, making the message something that really hits home with them, that isn't just about taking care of the community or isn't taking care of other children or taking care of everybody's future, but taking care of their people, taking care of themselves, taking care of their future. Okay, take the facts and what they're going to gain and connect them to the individual and their emotions. Again, think about their emotions. Okay, you're trying to move away from messaging about, community at large or, a group of people. You have to make the message singular. You have to make it specific to them. So sure, there's going to be times, regardless of no matter how much message crafting you do, that we're going to be using, words like community and us, and it's necessary. There's times where that's necessary. But try really hard to focus on connecting your message to a singular person, wording it for a singular person in a way that triggers an emotion. So possessive words, like your, ours should be leading here. It's often a really good habit to put the benefits or what will be attained to start the message. Why? Because people's attention spans is really short. So if you tell people right away within the first second or 2 seconds what it is that they're going to gain or how they're going to be affected, then it's more likely that they're going to pay attention to the rest of your message. So start off with what's the benefit or what's going to be attained to start off the message. Then you're going to move to top priority. Top priority means making it a top priority for them. So you need to add urgency to the statement to make it a proper call to action. Okay, make it something that has to be done right now, because if not, either they won't gain the benefits or they're going to be affected negatively. Okay, even when people are moved by a message, it's very easy. We all lead very busy lives. So it's very easy for somebody to say, oh yeah, that's important to me, but I'll do it later, because I have to take care of this other thing. And then you forget about it. I know I get emails all the time from organizations that I really appreciate and support and want to help. But I'll read the message and say, yep, you know what? I'm gonna read that article a little later. But right now I got to take care of this other thing. But it's all about like creating that urgency that tells them, look, you need to handle this right now, because if not, it's going to directly affect you. Okay, why do they need to act now? Remember to keep in mind that it should be stated in a way that makes it urgent for that individual person to take action in that particular moment. Things like the deadline for signatures coming up. The governor's going to sign it tomorrow. It's going to go into bill. Yeah, it's going to go into hearing. It's going to go into hearing, 2 weeks from now. If we don't get the aid necessary, within a month, X number of community members are going to be left, without housing. There's an infinite number of ways to create urgency depending on what it is that you're trying to actually get people to take action on. So start with the facts. What's the data that they need to know or they may not know. Talk about what's either gained or is the negative effect. Recraft those things into singular wording so that it's talking to them as an individual and not as a community at large. And then give it urgency so that it's top priority for them. So that's what we call fast message crafting. After we've done that for several messages, and this is going to take some time, depending on the number of personas you have, depending on the different facts that affect the different archetypes of personas that you're talking to, depending on the different benefits. I mean, you could be crafting anywhere from like something as simple as 2 to 3 messages to something as complex as varying messages that are targeted to very specific people. But the reason we actually want to take the time to do that is because one of the biggest benefits of online communication is the fact that we can target. It's something that we can actually pay or just use the tools at our disposal that don't require an investment, that allow us to actually reach people within a certain geographic location, reach people who have certain interests like the ones that we outlined on the persona, reach people who follow certain news outlets, people who watch certain TV shows, people who follow certain influencers. That's something that we can't do with other traditional media platforms, like TV, radio, and print. They have the people that read them, but they can't say, yes, I'm going to get you, I'm going to put your message in front of a single father who likes auto sports and visits Walmart every 3 weeks. Whereas online, that's something you can actually do. You could say, I want somebody, who's been to Pep Boys 3 times in the last 4 months. being that specific often takes an investment, but even if you just use the general targeting that we can use on platforms such as Facebook, again, you can reach people within a certain geographic location, or people who, you know, are online between certain hours, or again, follow certain interests. So if we don't understand those things, then we're not leveraging those opportunities. Were there any questions that came up in the chat? Okay. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, because we're going to be wrapping up soon, make sure to use the chat to ask those. So now that we're talking about targeting, you've crafted your message. We have one question. Do you guys have any data idea which tool is the most effective for online engagement, depending on demographics? And if you're talking about the platform to use, there are different general demographics for the different platforms. I actually have a tool that I can probably send you that will help you identify which platforms are most effective depending on like different communities that they might belong to. It's called a channel ranker. And it took into account the fact that, for example, you know, Instagram tends to have a younger following or younger users between 18 and 35, whereas something like LinkedIn obviously has older users, which is usually 35 to 55 plus. There's certain platforms that tend to appeal to women more than males, and then there's the opposite. You know, certain platforms that tend to appeal to males more. And then there is also some limited data based on Pew Research Center about particular communities that prefer certain platforms. You know, there's certain platforms that LGBTQ plus prefer, and, you know, communities of color tend to use more and things like that. So I'll actually, it wasn't supposed to be a part of this training, but since we got the question, I'll actually include that as one of the tools that we send to you that may help you decide which platform would help you connect more effectively with the particular communities that you're trying to connect with. Yeah. All right. So we've put all this work into figuring out who it is that we're talking to. What are the things that they're saying? What are their interests? What are their challenges? What are their motivations? We've crafted messages that start with what it is that they're going to gain or what they're going to lose by either taking action or not taking action, why it should be top priority and getting them to move to action immediately, and all that good stuff. But unfortunately, our work doesn't end there. Why? Because the demography, there's different habits that change very quick. In this day and age, things change very quickly, especially the way that we talk to people. Last week, one meme could be really popular, and this week it's a different meme. When we're talking about online, the way that people take, use, and receive information changes very, very rapidly, which is very different to, you know, traditional media. You know, people are used to seeing one commercial and seeing it repeatedly, and after they see it repeatedly, that's when the message gets to them. But when you're talking about online, if you're not in the moment and not figuring out how people are talking or using particular words at the moment that a certain issue happened, or something in pop culture affected, or, you know, that Kim Kardashian posted, or that all these different things that affect the way that people talk and interact online, then oftentimes the message has again become obsolete, even though you've put all this work into crafting the message. So the one thing that we want to make sure that we're doing after we're actually placing messages is then testing. We should be testing so that we know that the way that we're putting messages across is actually effective. Because of course we've done the persona outlining and we've crafted our messages, but these are, again, since these are the people that we haven't interacted with yet, the only way that we can actually know that we're being effective is by actually measuring and tracking how that's happening. The way that I call it is called ACT testing. So there's 3 different areas that we're usually going to be testing when we're crafting different messages, different things that we want to be testing to see how the audience reacts to it. And you want to do these things individually, because if you do all of them at the same time, you're not going to be able to identify what was the difference, what was the variable that actually either hurt or helped you. So the ACT testing is basically thinking about audience, right? So if you're doing targeting and you're picking like a certain geographic area, does it help to broaden the area? Does it help to target the area more? Is it, if originally you were trying to reach out to men because you thought it was an issue that really affected them, but then you tested doing a combination of men and women and saw more success, well, then you know that maybe then you need to be targeting both genders instead of just one. If you're talking about an age group, you may think this is something that only matters to students. But then you do some testing and you realize that it also matters, to young parents or something like that. But the only way to do that is to actually be testing your messages, refining them for small tweaks, and figuring out what is actually connecting better with the people that you're trying to talk to. So that's audience. Then there's content. You're also going to want to be testing what works best. Do they react to pictures more? Are videos more popular? Generally speaking, on most, especially social media platforms, video is very, very popular. We all know that. But there could be small differences as far as like where you gather your news sources from, the way that you actually word your content. If you're actually asking people to take action, do more people open the email if you put action alert at the beginning of the message, or if you say, we need your help? The only way you're going to know that is by actually testing these variations in the content. And then there's timing. So timing is going to be, what days am I posting? What days am I sending out emails? What times? There's information all kinds of information online that you'll find online about what works well nationally. There's information that says, that Tuesdays and Thursdays are best to send out emails, that 6 p.m. works better than 12 noon, and all these kinds of different things. And one, that information changes all the time. And two, that's a national number. It's not necessarily going to apply to your specific audience. And you really want to know what's working with your particular audience. So those are the three areas that you're going to want to be testing all the time. But we kind of get bogged up and don't remember, so it's important to actually have somebody who's tracking that. So for that reason, I actually created a tracking tool that should be able to help you track these different changes. It's called the Communications Testing Tracker, and it's going to help you track how much of a percentage these different variables can have either on your email, your social media, or your ads. So I'll be sending this out to you. And basically, on each of the tabs, you'll see where you'll identify the different variable type, whichever falls under those three sections, whether it's audience. If it's audience, it'll be, this, again, like the age group, or, the demography of the people that you're trying to reach out to. If it's content, it's going to be, like your subject line, the copy, whether or not there was a media inclusion, or if you used a link. If it's timing, then it's going to be day of time or frequency. So you're going to decide what the variable type is. You'll actually type a very small explanation of what that variable was. So let's say if you started including action alerts at the beginning of your email subject line, you'll type that. And then you're going to compare it. You'll want to start off with your basic information now. So whatever platforms you're using right now to send out your communications, or that you're actually posting on, you'll want to start with your beginning numbers. So that will take a little bit of work on your part. But even if you don't, it should over time track the percent changes for these different things. So you'll notice on social media, I actually have like some fake test data. And so I put starting averages, fake starting averages, basically on like how many click-throughs on average, over the last 28 days, 18, how many likes and favorites, how many comments, how many shares and retweets. So I started with my baseline, and then I identified, sorry, the different variables that would be tested, and then what changes there were in these different variables. And it tells me a percentage change. Based from my baseline, it tells me how much of either an increase or decrease there was. If there was a significant increase, it will light up in red. If there was a significant decrease, it will highlight it in, it will highlight it in green if there's a significant increase. If there's a significant decrease, it will highlight it in red. So then you can actually immediately see what things are most effective and try to test them again to verify that it's something that is actually helping or hindering. And then continue to implement those things as you see that they are actually helping. So this is another one of the tools that you'll be getting after we wrap up the webinar. All right. Okay, so we basically covered how to outline the people that you're talking to. We've talked about how we identify what it is that they're saying already about you. We talked about how to actually write out your message and then rewrite it so that it's actually factual, talks about what they'll gain or lose, talks to them on an individual level, and then creates urgency, and then about testing. Do you come across testing situations that do really bad? If so, how do you bounce back? Yes, of course, there can be situations where things go really poorly, and it usually will be words that kind of don't connect with people. It could often be putting out information that we think people care about, or we think they should care about, but actually doesn't connect. And it might not even be the information itself, but the way that we're wording the information that makes it either a little too how can I say it? States it in a way that makes them feel like you're not talking to them. Either you're talking above them or you're talking below them, or something like that. So it disconnects them from what it is that you're trying to connect them to. Because the way that we state things often weighs a lot more than what it is that we're actually saying with people. So there are times that, of course, you can have a negative result. You do want to confirm. Don't think automatically. The one thing that I've seen with testing is that people will try something, and because on that very first post or that very first email, there were negative numbers, they're like, I'm not going to try that again because I don't want to see those kind of negative numbers. But as probably any scientist will tell you, you have to repeat the test multiple times to see if you get the same result, to actually see if that there's actually a trend. So if there is something that happens that causes a negative reaction, which can happen sometimes depending on where we fall on an issue, also as an organization, might actually misalign with the people that have supported us for long periods of time, or things like that. It's again going back and re-looking at that persona outline and thinking about how is it that that person, depending on the challenges, the motivations, and the support that I can provide, how are they actually connecting with this particular issue? That's why for every persona, when a new issue comes up or something else that we're going to be talking about, we want to go back and reference those personas again to think about how that individual person is going to take the information. The way that you bounce back is by realigning your messages to connect with them personally and remaining consistent. If for some reason, let's say it's where your organization falls on a particular issue and you're not going to change like your viewpoint, your organization is not going to change their stance, then it's just about being very clear about why you've taken that stance, why it's important to take that stance, or you feel it's important to take that stance as an organization, and just being very transparent with them about why it is that you're communicating that way.
That's what testing is for. No?
Yeah, just my coworkers just making sure that I stay, and that's the whole reason of what the testing is about. The whole thing with testing, we've taken tests our whole lives. We know that sometimes there's positive outcomes and sometimes there's negative outcomes. The whole point is not that you're going to avoid negative outcomes, because that's impossible, because there's things that we think will work great and they just don't. They don't connect the way that we want them to. But it's about noticing the trend and then transitioning the way that we're stating things or putting information out to reconnect with the people that we're trying to get to support us. Anything else? Okay. And again, if you have like a really individual situation that maybe you'd like to talk about, please feel free to reach out to me via email. When I send out the tools, it'll be from my personal email. So you can just reply to that message and say, hey, you know what, I have this particular situation. Can I get some feedback on it? Or what do you think? You know, not that I'm going to be 100% correct all the time, but I'm more than willing to be a thought partner on different things that might come up. Now, we've covered all of the information. Like I said, we've gone through, you know, the persona outlining, the social listening, the crafting the messages, and the testing. Please, what I want to leave for these last few minutes is any other questions that you may have on anything that we discussed today. about the tools that we talked about, or anything else that comes to mind now that we've covered all of this information. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat window. I'm looking at them right now, and we can try to discuss and cover those things. Also, even if you don't have a question, what would be really great, and I'm hoping all of you will actually do, is please share in the chat window what your takeaway from today's training is. What stuck with you? What was an aha moment, or something that you hadn't thought about, or something that you'll find useful in the future, that it may be helpful to actually remind everybody else on the webinar about. What was your biggest takeaway from today's training? I didn't know about archetypes. Well, that's the thing. Archetypes is something that and I didn't explain my history. I told you about where I am right now, but my history is I actually come from the marketing world. I had about 18 years of experience within the marketing world, and archetypes is a big thing in the marketing world. We always think about who it is that we're talking to before we even start a discussion about what it is that we want to say to them. Building a profile and the websites that we shared were really cool. I'm really glad that those are helpful. Hopefully you'll take some time to actually visit those and implement them, use them to help you really do the social listening. Outlining persona, social listening, and the persona outline. Great. I'm so happy that connected with everybody, because I do think that those were two of the biggest takeaways from today's training, to make sure that we're actually speaking to who we need to speak to, and saying the things that we need to say, the things that they want to hear. So I want to thank everybody so much for joining today. This was our first webinar, so I apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning. Hopefully for the next ones that we have planned for the future, we won't have those same issues. I'll include in the message when I'm sending out the tools. We're also going to be including an evaluation. It's going to be really quick and really simple, but it will really help us improve these trainings for the future, not just this individual training, but just our trainings in general. So if you could please take the time to fill out that evaluation, I would really appreciate it. Also, make sure to visit instituto.io, INSTUTITO.io, and sign up for the updates so that you can receive all of the trainings and other events that we have coming up. If you were somebody that was here at our launch, we really appreciate it. It was a really great and fun event, and we plan on having more of those throughout the year. But we also plan on having other free trainings that will cover different topics. So make sure to sign up for those updates. Thank you so much, Georgina. I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for joining us. So look forward to hearing you all in the future, and for joining us in future trainings. Thanks so much, and have a great evening.